March 2, 1981. Pakistan International Airlines Flight PK-326, a Fokker F-27 friendship aircraft, took off from Karachi to Peshawar with a stopover in Islamabad. The crew, seasoned professionals, prepared for the routine domestic flight. Little did anyone know that this ordinary flight was about to take a terrifying turn. The atmosphere inside the aircraft was electric with fear. The hijackers, masked and armed, barked orders. The leader, Salamullah, spoke of political prisoners and a government that had betrayed its people. He vowed to avenge his brother's death and fight for freedom. Salamullah declared that the passengers' safe release hinged on the Pakistani government's willingness to meet his demands. The Fokker F-27, now under hijackers' control, veered towards Kabul, Afghanistan. The passengers, filled with anxiety, looked out at the snow-capped peaks of the Afghan highlands. The hijackers demanded silence and obedience. The plane began its descent into Kabul, and a palpable sense of dread settled over the passengers. The plane taxied to a halt at Kabul International Airport, surrounded by armed soldiers. The passengers disembarked, herded by the hijackers. The Afghan authorities, sympathetic to the hijackers' cause, were unsure how to proceed. The hijackers issued demands for food, water, medical supplies, and refueling to fly to Damascus, Syria. News of the hijacking spread, igniting a diplomatic firestorm. The Pakistani government vowed to resolve the crisis peacefully, reopening diplomatic channels with Afghanistan. The hijackers demanded the release of 90 political prisoners. The standoff in Kabul dragged on, the fate of Flight PK-326 hanging in the balance. Inside the cramped Fokker F-27, time stood still. The passengers clung to hope amidst squalor and despair. The hijackers, their initial bravado replaced by edginess, demanded obedience and silence. They subjected passengers to psychological torture, playing loud revolutionary songs and delivering fiery speeches. The hijackers, frustrated by stalled negotiations, allowed journalists onto the plane. Images of the hijacked plane and armed guards at Kabul airport flashed across screens worldwide. The hijackers threatened to blow up the plane if their demands were not met. They subjected passengers to mock executions, intensifying psychological pressure. On the fourth day, the hijackers announced they would execute a passenger. Their victim, Tariq Rahim, a Pakistani diplomat. A single gunshot echoed through the cabin, and Rahim slumped to the floor. News of Rahim's execution sent shockwaves across Pakistan and the world. The execution of Tariq Rahim drew global condemnation. The hijacking escalated into a global flashpoint, with superpowers playing geopolitical chess. The Pakistani government faced immense pressure to act. The military presented options, from a commando raid to full-scale intervention. As the standoff entered its second week, Pakistan turned to back channels for secret negotiations. Intermediaries carried messages between Islamabad and Kabul. The Pakistani government was willing to make concessions but wary of setting a dangerous precedent. The negotiations were fraught with danger, every meeting a gamble. General Mohammad Zia-ul-Haq, the military dictator who had seized power in a coup, faced a significant challenge. The hijacking of Flight PK-326 presented him with an agonizing dilemma. Zia, a devout Muslim, was ideologically opposed to giving in to terrorist demands. He viewed the hijackers as criminals and a threat to his regime. Yet he was aware of the human cost of inaction. The lives of over 100 innocent Pakistani citizens hung in the balance. The weight of the nation's expectations rested heavily upon him. The families of the hostages pleaded for their loved ones' safe return. The media scrutinized his every move. The world was watching, waiting to see how he would respond. In Damascus, Syria, a city steeped in history, a different kind of drama was unfolding. At the Damascus International Airport, a chartered plane stood ready to receive the hostages from Flight PK-326. Inside, anxious relatives and friends waited with hope and trepidation. They had traveled from all over Pakistan, their faces etched with worry and fatigue. They had endured days of uncertainty, clinging to every scrap of news. They prayed for a miracle, their faith tested by the hijackers' cruelty. They prepared welcome banners, a testament to their love and relief. They braced for the emotional reunion, the tears of joy and the tales of horror. The atmosphere in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, was thick with tension. Days had turned into nights, each hour marked by agonizing uncertainty and the crushing weight of responsibility. General Zia, his face etched with fatigue and the burden of a nation's hopes, had sequestered himself with his closest advisors, their deliberations shrouded in secrecy. Outside the halls of power, the families of the hostages maintained their desperate vigil. Their numbers had swelled, their ranks now bolstered by concerned citizens, their voices a chorus of anguish and anger. They demanded action, their pleas echoing through the streets, a poignant reminder of the human cost of the stalemate. Then, on the 13th day of the hijacking, a glimmer of hope emerged from the diplomatic shadows. Back-channel negotiations, conducted in secrecy and fraught with risk, had yielded a breakthrough. The hijackers, their demands somewhat softened after days of intense pressure, had agreed to a deal. The details of the agreement were closely guarded, but rumors spread like wildfire through the corridors of power and the anxious crowds outside. The hijackers, it was whispered, had agreed to release the hostages in exchange for the release of a smaller group of political prisoners, their names carefully redacted from the initial list. Section 2. The Prisoner Exchange, a high-stakes gambit. The prisoner exchange was a logistical and diplomatic tightrope walk, every step fraught with danger, every decision carrying the weight of potential catastrophe. The Pakistani government, under intense international scrutiny, found itself navigating a treacherous path, balancing the safety of its citizens with the need to avoid setting a dangerous precedent. The agreed-upon plan involved a carefully choreographed sequence of events. A Pakistan Air Force C-130 Hercules transport plane, its markings obscured, would fly to Kabul carrying the group of prisoners whose release had been secured through back-channel negotiations. Simultaneously, a chartered aircraft, its arrival in Damascus eagerly awaited, would stand ready to receive the hostages. The world watched with bated breath as the drama unfolded. News crews camped out at airports in Kabul, Islamabad, and Damascus provided minute-by-minute updates, their cameras capturing the tension and anticipation etched on the faces of officials, families, and the global audience. The stakes were incredibly high. Any miscalculation, any misstep, any sudden shift in the hijackers' unpredictable behavior could have plunged the situation into chaos, turning a fragile hope into unimaginable tragedy. Section 3. Freedom Flight, from Kabul to Damascus. As the sun began its final descent, casting long shadows across the tarmac of Kabul International Airport, the chartered aircraft carrying the freed hostages from flight PK-326 taxied into position for takeoff. Inside the cabin, a wave of relief, tinged with disbelief and the lingering trauma of their ordeal, washed over the passengers. For 13 long days, they had endured the unimaginable. The terror of the hijacking, the cramped and squalid conditions, the psychological torture inflicted by their captors, the constant fear for their lives and the lives of their loved ones. They had witnessed firsthand the brutality of the hijackers, their hearts forever marked by the memory of Tariq Rahim's senseless murder. But now, as the plane lifted off the runway, leaving behind the dust and turmoil of Kabul, a sense of cautious optimism began to bloom in their hearts. They were free. They were going home. Their journey, however, was far from over. Ahead of them lay the long flight to Damascus, where anxious families and a nation's prayers awaited their arrival. They carried with them the physical and emotional scars of their ordeal, the memories of fear and uncertainty, but also the resilience of the human spirit, the unwavering belief in the power of hope, even in the darkest of times. Section 4. The hijackers' fate. Justice delayed. The release of the hostages was met with jubilation in Pakistan and around the world. Families were reunited, tears of joy mingled with tears of relief. General Zia, his political fortunes revived by the successful resolution of the crisis, addressed the nation, praising the resilience of the Pakistani people and the bravery of the hostages. Yet, amidst the celebrations, a crucial question lingered. What would become of the hijackers? They had been granted safe passage to Damascus as part of the deal to release the hostages, but their crimes, hijacking, hostage-taking, and the cold-blooded murder of Tariq Rahim, demanded justice. The hijackers, however, seemed to have vanished into the labyrinthine world of international terrorism. Some reports placed them in Libya, granted refuge by Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, a staunch critic of the Pakistani government and a known supporter of various militant groups. The Pakistani government vowed to pursue all avenues to bring the hijackers to justice, but their efforts were hampered by political realities and the complexities of international law. The hijackers, it seemed, had escaped accountability, their crimes overshadowed by the relief of the hostages' release and the passage of time. The question of their fate, however, would continue to linger, a reminder of the long reach of terrorism, the challenges of international justice, and the enduring need to hold those responsible for acts of violence accountable for their crimes. Scars and shadows. The hostages return. The chartered aircraft carrying the freed hostages touched down at Damascus International Airport, greeted by cheers and cameras. After 13 days of terror, the passengers of Flight PK-326 were finally home, embraced by family and a nation's relief. Yet, as the euphoria subsided, a stark reality set in. The journey back from the hijacking extended far beyond the tarmac. The psychological scars ran deep, etched by trauma. The constant fear, the sleep deprivation, the psychological torture, these invisible wounds would take much longer to heal. The road to recovery was long, paved with therapy, medication, and the support of loved ones. The hijacking of Flight PK-326 sent shockwaves through Pakistani society, exposing deep-seated political divisions and prompting a reassessment of the nation's security apparatus. The government, initially praised for securing the release of the hostages, soon faced a barrage of criticism for its handling of the crisis. Opponents of General Zia's military regime accused the government of weakness and incompetence, arguing that its initial reluctance to negotiate had emboldened the hijackers and prolonged the hostages' ordeal. The execution of Tariq Rahim, a respected diplomat, sparked outrage and fueled calls for accountability. The government's decision to release political prisoners in exchange for the hostages, while understandable in the context of the crisis, set a dangerous precedent, signaling to other militant groups that hostage-taking could be an effective tool to achieve their aims. The hijacking also exposed the vulnerability of Pakistan's aviation industry to terrorist attacks. Security measures at airports at that time were woefully inadequate, allowing the hijackers to smuggle weapons on board with relative ease. The incident served as a wake-up call, prompting a major overhaul of airport security protocols, including the introduction of metal detectors, baggage screening, and increased vigilance by security personnel. The political fallout from the hijacking had long-lasting consequences. It further polarized Pakistani society, deepening the divide between Zia's supporters and those who viewed his rule as illegitimate. The incident also cast a long shadow over Pakistan's international relations, damaging the country's reputation and raising concerns about its ability to effectively combat terrorism. The hijacking of Flight PK-326 stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of terrorism and the enduring challenges of bringing perpetrators to justice. The incident, seared into the collective memory of a nation, forced Pakistan to confront its vulnerabilities, both internal and external, and to reassess its approach to national security. In the aftermath of the hijacking, Pakistan implemented sweeping reforms to enhance aviation security, strengthening airport protocols and bolstering intelligence gathering to prevent future attacks. The incident also highlighted the need for greater international cooperation in combating terrorism, particularly in sharing intelligence and coordinating efforts to apprehend and prosecute those responsible for such heinous acts. Yet despite the passage of time, the quest for justice for the victims of Flight PK-326 remains unfulfilled. The hijackers, their identities confirmed but their whereabouts unknown, have evaded accountability. Their crimes a stark reminder of the limitations of international law and the challenges of prosecuting terrorists who operate across borders. The memory of Flight PK-326 serves as a powerful reminder of the need for vigilance, the importance of international cooperation, and the enduring human capacity for resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. The incident, though tragic, also underscored the importance of dialogue and diplomacy in resolving conflicts and preventing future acts of terrorism. The hijacking of PIA Flight PK-326 stands as a chilling testament to the vulnerability of civilian aviation in an era marked by political turbulence and the rise of international terrorism. The incident serves as a stark reminder that even the seemingly mundane act of boarding an aircraft can transform into a harrowing ordeal. The events of March 2, 1981 exposed the limitations of airport security protocols at the time. The hijacking triggered a global reassessment of aviation security measures, prompting reforms that shape how we travel today. Stricter baggage screening and enhanced passenger protocols are a direct legacy of Flight PK-326. Beyond aviation, the hijacking underscored the complex geopolitical landscape of the Cold War era. The incident highlighted how internal political struggles could spill over national borders, transforming isolated events into international crises. The hijacking of Flight PK-326 revealed the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Hostages found strength in unity, supporting each other through the darkest hours. Their courage and determination served as a beacon of hope amidst terror. Families exhibited extraordinary strength and resolve. Their unwavering faith and love provided comfort and inspiration. The hijacking serves as a testament to the power of diplomacy and international cooperation. It reminds us of the importance of vigilance, cooperation, and human resilience.